Welcome back to 1986, everybody, where Jason finally came back after a fifth entry that was a bit lackluster, and we didn't cover it, and that's okay too. We might do that on the next round, but Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, and let's go.
They thought the nightmare was dead and buried. They were wrong. Jason lives. Happy Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason lives.
Oh, shit.
The blackest eyes. The devil's eyes.
You will suffer an eternity for this.
And welcome back, everybody. Jeff and Kevin, like always, but this time we got a special guest joining us today as we talk about Friday the 13th, Part 6 with Jason Lives. We got Vincent DiSanti of Never Hike Alone and Never Hike Alone 2, Never Hike Alone in the Snow. We got him with us this time. All right, Vincent, you're a big fan of this franchise. What is some of your first memories of this movie?
Jason Lives is one of the first Friday the 13th films that I ever saw. But before I get going to that, I just want to say thank you for having me, guys. It's good to see you both.
Absolutely.
Glad to be talking Jason Lives. Jason Lives is actually my favorite entry into the franchise, but it is definitely one of the first ones that I saw. And I don't know, I think that like everything about Friday the 13th, as far as what it matured into and what it became, I think that like Jason Lives is like the perfect capsule of like it hitting its peak. And I think, you know, I saw this movie when I was young and just fell in love with it. The aesthetic, just sort of the scope and the scale of it. The final showdown between Tommy and Jason is just so epic. And then at the end of it, you know, with Jason, you know, being put at the bottom of the lake for years as a kid, I was convinced that Jason was at the bottom of my lake. And so this movie haunted me for years, and it's the one that sort of cemented my love for Friday the 13th and becoming a big Friday the 13th fan.
That's pretty rad. Now, Kevin, how about you?
So this would probably be the one that I do remember watching the most vividly when I was a kid. I think this was probably the one my friends and I rented on VHS the most often. And I think this is the one that got it into my head where someone's always trying to reopen the camp. No, apparently that's not true. It's just in this one in part 2. Oh, in the first one. But no, like I really dug this one and I really latched onto it again because seeing Tom, I liked Tom a lot from Return of the Living Dead. So just having that familiarity just kind of made it even more special for me. I just really dug this one.
Yeah, this is probably one of the ones I watched the most, and probably I want to say it's the first one I ever watched because this was on cable a lot because it was already pretty tame by itself. Like, of course, they trimmed the gore, they cut down on some of the swearing, but there's like no nudity in this movie, and unfortunately, that's one of the bad parts of that, and we'll get to that eventually. But as far as like, you know, what it could do for a mass appeal, this was on cable the most from when I was a kid. I think it was USA Channel for me, so I watched it that way. And then when I did rent it from the rental store, I was like, oh, this is even better. I enjoyed all the death scenes and a little extra gore, and all the swearing was like, okay, here we go. And then it brought me into the rest of the franchise, so really enjoyed that. Now, before we get to the good, the bad, and the ugly of Jason Lives, Vincent, you are working on a new Kickstarter. I want you to front load a shill for everybody, and then we'll cap off at the end with another round.
Yeah, sure. Womp Films has just returned to Kickstarter for the first time since our original Never Hike Alone campaign that helped us finish the movie. We're returning with something called Never Hike Alone, the Final Cut, which is all of our films that we've been doing over the last 8 years in one large feature. So fans basically anytime any of this comes up, fans usually message me and they're like, are you ever putting the films all together as one film? And this is the answer, is the Final Cut. So it's going to be available on Blu-ray and VHS. You can pre-order it right now on Kickstarter. The goal is $50,000 to afford all the post-production work that we're going to do, printing the Blu-ray, shipping them, and, you know, other things like shirts and t-shirts. I mean, well, shirts and t-shirts are the same thing, but sweatshirts, posters, pins, things like that. So there's a whole bevy of things that we have based on this new artwork that we got from Josh Beamish. It's really, really cool. We're going to try and jam pack it with bonus features and anything else that goes there. There's also an extended stretch goal that if we reach $100,000, we want to include a new piece of Friday the 13th fan filmage, which is called Ghost in the Fog, which is actually an animated Friday the 13th fan film where 3 kids get lost in a fog, stumble in the Camp Crystal Lake, and I bet you can guess what happens next. They run into Jason Voorhees, and we get 3 really cool animated kills in the span of about 7 minutes. We're working with a company called Mako Animation out of Mexico, who's been refining this project over the last year. We'll be posting a lot of concept work and test sequences and things like that on our social media pages, which is under Womp Stomp Films. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're on TikTok and a few other things too, and of course YouTube. So if you're following us on YouTube, all of this information is going to be there along with the films as they're streaming now. But yeah, we're excited about the Kickstarter. We're excited about putting the films together. Fans may remember previously we did something called a Ghost Cut, which put Disappeared, Never Hike in the Snow, and Never Hike Alone together to prep everybody for Never Hike Alone 2. The final cut will be a little bit different, where it's not going to be just a straight anthology style, like we're just laying out the films one after the other. This is going to be a more seamless, fluid cut with one introduction sequence, and then the films are going to just work right into each other in continuity order. Or maybe not. We might do some jumping around in time. We're going to experiment with a few different things, but this is going to be like one film. It should be about 2 hours ish long, which will be pretty cool. And it's mostly going to focus on Never Hike in the Snow, Never Hike Alone, and Never Hike Alone 2, with all of those wonderful story arcs kind of weaving into one another. And that Disappear music video is most likely going to end up a big major section of our opening title sequence. So
nice.
A lot of fun, some new voiceover by Tom Matthews to help narrate us over the years about how Never Hike Alone connects to the original franchise. And then, we're saying that if we can get to a super bonus goal, which would be like $150,000, we will start to think about, putting some extra scenes in the film. So there's a couple of scenes that we had to cut out of Never Hike Alone 2 when we were filming. And if we're basically aiming for the project to be done next year on Jason's 79th birthday on June 13th, 2025. That gives us 6 solid months of just, working in post-production, giving our post-production teams a real comfy schedule like they've never had before. But in that time would also allow us to go out and maybe pick up a scene or two. So depending on how much we add, it's either adding like a couple small scenes here or there, or even going as far as adding 5 more deaths to the entire cut. So everything's available on the Kickstarter. There's the previous Blu-rays, which I do say that if you want the full catalog, you do want to get the old films, because we may cut out some sequences and scenes that don't fit into the larger narrative. So not everything's going to make it into the final cut. That's why it's the final cut. Like, we're making the final decisions on everything. We also might bring up some scenes that we dropped before, or swap out different things where we had a choice and we chose one thing for Never Hike Alone, and maybe like, hey, we could put that other scene back in there and use it because it does the same exact thing. Lots of cool stuff. But anyway, that's like I said, that's funding on Kickstarter right now. It launched on Friday the 13th. We're already about $28,000, and we still have about 39 days to go. The campaign will close on October 31st, Halloween at midnight. Nice. So definitely get your pre-orders in early so we can start pushing for those extended goals as we reach our goal, and then go into our late checkout version of Kickstarter, where we'll keep raising money to keep adding money to the project.
Wow, that sounds pretty rad. And we'll have links down in the description below, links to your channel, links to Kickstarter, everything. I've been a proud supporter for years. I got some of the VHS tapes and everything. Great. I'm even rocking a shirt. And
nice. Oh, yeah. You got the Ghost Jason shirt. That's great.
Yep. And before you even had agreed to do this with us, we were already planning to do Never Hike Alone 1 and 2 for our next 2 movies on our review series.
Beautiful. That's awesome.
Some of us already did, you schmutz.
I know. We were planning this like months ago, and it's like, nah, this
2
doesn't
years
fit
ago.
Here. We're going to do that later. So we're having fun with Jason right now, and it makes sense for us to go from part 6 into things that actually tie into it rather than like part 7, because
then it's
random
the end
ideas. We'll just do the other Friday the 13th when other Friday the 13th months come up. That'll make it fun for us. So
Yeah, and we got another one coming up in December, which is nice. And then obviously next year, there's going to be plenty, I think, for us to talk about as far as Friday the 13th fans go over the next year or so with the, they're talking about a video game, they're talking about the TV show, a film is still many, many years off, it sounds like, but it sounds like other things are in the works. They really haven't seen the Jason universe play their hand yet.
We keep hearing this stuff, but
I know,
all I got to say about most of that, and especially for you, take my money already. All right, Kevin, let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly of Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives.
Before we do that, you already apologized to everybody that we skipped part 5. Here's a brief recap of why we skipped part 5. It's slow. It's too long.
It's not Jason.
It's not Jason. And it sums up best by Daddy Needed a Snickers. So, that having been said, the good
recap.
The good of part 6 is we get to see Jason again. And not only do we have Jason again, but now we have a Jason that explains he can't die. He's dead. He's long dead, so he can't die. There's no stopping this monster that comes back in this movie from this point on.
Kill it with fire. No, that don't work.
No. Inevitably, something just drops water on him, puts him out.
Wait, are we talking Freddy versus Jason? Like, dude, no.
No.
Or is this where the fear of water comes from for that?
Oh, please, no.
I'm kidding.
I know, right?
I know the answer is Ronnie Yu, but who came up with that idea? Like,
I mean, I know that the writers really defend it because they're saying that they're in Jason's subconscious, so his fears are more susceptible. But that was such a weak moment in the film because all of that tension in the moment just dies when Jason can't stand to look at like a drain of water. It's just like if as a Friday the 13th fan, you're like, it's like the ultimate blue balls where you're just like, what is this? It's like fight already. Like Jason's not going to stop because of water. I mean, especially with this movie, like there's a whole water fight scene where he just walks in like a boss. He doesn't give a shit. He's just like, you know what I mean? And so you're going to say that Jason's afraid of water. I always said that it would have been better if he created that waterfall and as Jason tried to slash through it, when he slashed through it, they should have done a transition where as he went through the water, he turned into a child and ended up on the dock. Like Freddy disappeared. That would have been a cool thing that worked in the favor of Freddy, but it didn't diminish Jason in the moment to the point where fans are going to go like, why is he stopping? You're telling me he's afraid of the water? I don't think so. Like being afraid of drowned by Freddy, that is frightening for him. Yeah. But just the sight of water, that was like, again, that was something that they should have known that Friday the 13th fans were going to push back on.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were expecting at that point. Like, I think they were really thinking that whatever they handed out, people were just going to eat out of their hand.
We've been waiting for the freaking movie for how long? They teased it after Goes to Hell, and it took them 10 years to get to it. Like
it was teased before part 7. It was supposed to be part 7 before it was Jason versus Carrie. That was the first thing that they were going to do. And I believe that they asked Tom McLaughlin to come up with a pitch, and then that's what I think Mancuso told McLaughlin after part 6 that they were going to go after Freddy versus Jason. He came up with an idea, and then they said, forget it. We're not going to get the rights for anytime soon. And that's when you heard the famous story about McLaughlin coming up with Jason meets Cheech and Chong, which he pitched me the idea for, and it sounded fun. I mean, they were like it was going to be like part 6 again, but Cheech and Chong were going to be 2 characters in it. It was going to be hilarious.
Dude, they fit Jay and Silent Bob in Scream 3. I don't see as to why not.
Yeah, I know. I mean, basically, you had a Cheech and Chong character in part 3 with Chili and the other character there, but they were basically Cheech and Chong ripoffs, right? I mean, that's what they were.
Yeah,
1,000%.
He looked just like Tommy Chong, like
he did,
right down to the beard and glasses.
And they even put that guy in the freaking video game too.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. I love playing him, even though he was a terrible character to play.
The potheads are slow. I can't.
But we got to talk about the good about part 6, though.
Oh, I start with Jason myself personally. CJ Graham, top notch.
Oh yeah, I mean he definitely brings a new level of intensity to the character, and like Kev said, him coming back and being fully undead. There's no more sort of is he alive? Is he dead? Like what's the deal with Jason? Why does he keep coming back? Like seeing him get out of the grave when he is looking like that, like the mummified version of Jason where you can't see his face, and Haas comes and smacks him in the back of the head with a shovel, and he just eats it and doesn't even like flinch. There's just this level of like, oh my God, Tommy is so screwed. Everyone is so screwed. I think that gets you started off in the film. Like, yes, this Jason is going to be an absolute beast. And he is. I mean, this film, he just absolutely rips people apart in this movie.
Yeah. There's no stalking from the bushes moments. Like you pretty much just see him jetting towards people, grabbing them, slicing them, or the aftermath of it, whichever. But like he was a total machine, and we got to see him act that way a little bit in 4, but not like this. Not like this. He would still. I mean, he could bleed. You know, so like the shot across the head that took him down a peg for a moment. for a moment. But no, God, he was something else in this, an unstoppable tank, more so than Michael Myers. Like had such a more brutal effect to him. Like his walk could scare people more so, I think, than Michael Myers, because it was a more determined walk. Like you felt like it was coming straight at you, no matter which direction he was walking in the camera.
Yeah, that's where I feel like they took good elements from like previous entries and they brought it into this one and brought it all together in the like the perfect mold. Like he was walking like Richard Brooks in part 3. Like that's the kind of presence and force I wanted, because I'm a big fan of part 3. But you took all of the good elements out of part 4 and you gave him a fresh coat of paint in part 6. You gave him something different to him than, say, Michael Myers, who admittedly is more of a druid machine at this point in his life of the franchise. And Jason is just straight up Night of the Living Dead. How the hell do you stop this machine?
With the Necronomicon, we'd find out later, but still.
Don't get me started on that either.
No one got paid. No, like I totally love this one though. Like he was legitimately scary, and in the movie, like you said, it was kind of quintessential. Like they got everything that worked, and just let alone everything else. Like unfortunately, the boobies got put aside for that, but they were not necessary. They made this one everything that made the franchise fun, and they put it into this flick. And they made Tommy a much better hero in this movie than the previous 2 movies.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I love Tom Matthews as Tommy. Like, he's my Tommy. I like Corey, don't get me wrong, but Tom Matthews stands out amongst everybody in this cast. Like, if it wasn't for him, I don't know how much I'd actually like this, because some of the actors, like, they're very good and they have very unique characters. I mean, I really like Megan in this. Like, she stands out more than the girl in the what was that, part 3, Kevin, where I'm like, how many of these characters are actually memorable and unique? Megan's fighting against her dad. She's got a thing for Tommy, and then she's also part of the camp counselors. So she's actually got more of an arc than part 3 does. So
yeah, like the body count is the body count was lower in this one. They had to increase it, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah. So but they made you care about the characters again, and that's something that 3 and 4 was greatly lacking. Like you didn't care who died, and that was, I don't think that was due to the actors. That was just really due to the writing. Like you couldn't care what happened to the characters one way or the other. This, you had a lot more emotional investment in everybody from the very beginning on,
even in the kids too.
Yeah, I mean, the kids in this one definitely have something to do, which is nice. Like they're actually functionally trying to get this camp up and running while their head counselors are missing. You know, they're trying to figure out the legends of Jason because these things have popped up. There's just interesting dialogue to be had between the entire group, and there's stuff to talk about and there's stuff for them to do. I feel like in part 3, everyone's sort of hanging out and going on their own little adventures, but
Right.
nothing is like really all that too interesting, and a lot of it is just like, let's see what we can do with this 3D camera. And then 4 is a bit of like it's like a John Hughes teen comedy with Jason in it, where it's a bunch of horny teenagers are going out to try and meet girlfriends and get laid, and there's all these relationships sort of back and forth, and everyone's mission for the weekend is to get laid, and they all get killed, which is pretty funny, and it's pretty on point for Friday the 13th. So but what I think what they did was they took the focus off of like 5 or 6 kind of idiot kids who aren't paying attention, and now putting on screen these characters that are a little bit more self-aware to a certain degree. I mean, obviously Court isn't being self-aware, but some of these girls are not, like, they're not that dumb. They're trying to figure things out. Megan, especially, who is getting, in the mix of everything, involving the police with them sort of dealing with, which I think is cool. And what I like about parts 5 and 6 is that there's a lore now being built based on that first weekend of killing that 2 through 4 are, and that there's a legend now. There's like a true legend of what Jason is, and it's expanding and it's growing. And that was the unfortunate part of like what happens after part 6, is because they actually started to really create this nice arc for the series, and then diverted into let's just make a bunch of versus films or some one-off spin-offs that like sort of meet these odd demands. But for this to sort of like move the story forward, come up with a little bit more world building, I thought that was just some brilliant work by Tom McLaughlin and the way that he crafted this. And like you said with Tommy, like Tom Matthews comes in and gives us the hero that we've sort of been waiting for in these movies. And no longer is it not saying that, but it's no longer like the weak female character running away and screaming and fighting for her life at the end. It was somebody who was trying to engage with Jason and face him head on, but knowing that right away that he may be outmatched, and coming up with other ideas. So I just think that was for me, it's the most exciting movie for many of those reasons.
Yeah, I'm super glad they brought in Tom to direct and write this, because he certainly brought an energy, and there's some nice self-referential things in here. There's some pop culture references. He's even got some Alice Cooper music rocking through this bad boy, and it totally it gels together in like this perfect ball. And it's just so much fun. He directs the hell out of this, and I've been a fan of him ever since. So like, how can you go wrong bringing in somebody who's eager and excited to do this? And it shows on screen, like from the kills to like everything.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
The kills were fantastic. Like,
God, yeah.
I love the creativity of the horror community. I truly do. Like, the 80s was a very special time to outdo what had already been done before, by building off of what had been done before. Like, you'd seen the kill that they did, that they I don't want to say they redid the Kevin Bacon kill in part 4, but they went back and did an homage to that kill. And you'd start to see things like that in here with, the head crushing, the sheriff getting broken in half. That was amazing. Which we'd see that again later on in Freddy versus Jason, but still, I didn't want to say it again.
It's okay, Kevin.
Sorry.
Don't apologize. God, this is such a good fun movie, and I like how it's a tight, pacing with it, and the editing is pretty on point. We'll get to it later, but some of the deleted scenes, like, they really accentuate some of the kills just a little bit more, and that seems to be like par for the course for the Friday the 13th movies. Of, boy, all these death scenes are certainly interesting. I wonder if there was more to it. And just about with every single one, yes, there was more to it. And one of the best scenes, unfortunately, is in one of the cut scenes, and it's not even a death scene. It's Jason under the lake being hung by the rope at the very end, and it's this long shot away, and I'm thinking, where the hell was this in the movie? I went back and I looked, and I'm like, surely that was supposed to be in the movie. Now, granted, it's only like 3 seconds long. You're not killing a runtime by taking that out, and it's not doing anything to harm the movie as far as pacing goes. But this beautiful long shot, I see where these like figures and statues and custom figures people have made have been for like years. Like, it's so iconic, it's stunning, I freaking love it, and I would just wish that was in there. So
the reverse hanging is beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the way that the one thing that I like as far as like from another world building thing is that Tommy says we have to return him to his original resting place, which answers the question. It's like, did Jason actually drown? So if he's returning him to his actual resting place, we're going off the notion that like Jason did drown, and however he came back, he's sort of been this revenant all along. It's just
Right.
sort of taken him time to turn into this thing. He's been, you know, granted a second life or whatever the heck has happened, and he was able to grow and do all those things that we still can't explain. But the fact that the series sort of leans into the supernatural tropes, it goes very gothic. I think helps just kind of settle it in for what they had, because obviously Friday the 13th is sort of a sum of its parts in the sense that they would do a movie and think that maybe this would be it, and then it would make a ton of money. So they decided to make another one. So they didn't really come up with an excuse for Jason to get back up and go. He would just get back up and go. And, so for a while, I mean, it's funny how the way that we analyze films now and the way that we break down logic and things like that, and how in the 80s they were just like, it just keeps coming back. That's it. And that worked for an executive producer at Paramount, where they were like, well, I don't know, he just comes back. And they're like, okay, good, run with that and just have him murder 5, 10 more people. And, we're going to sell more of this. And so it was, I think that, and it's funny because like with the whole like reduction in nudity and sort of things like that, I mean, that was mostly Darcy DeMars just basically saying no. She was supposed to be topless in that scene, and she was just like, no, I'm not going to do it. And I think, this wasn't rated PG-13 back in 1980s, was it?
No,
so.
they were.
No, it wasn't. It was still hard R.
They were in risk of getting the PG-13, so they had to increase the gore, from what I understand.
Yeah. In the original script, Martin the caretaker didn't die. He was there in that ending scene with the father. That scene was the one that got cut out. Frank Mancuso told Tom, he's like, listen, we had this whole spiel where everybody thought Tommy was going to be the killer and they hated it. We don't want to do anything that gives anybody that notion. Take that out. So that's when Tom wrote those scenes with the couple that gets married or gets proposed to in the park. They have the proposal and they're making out in the park, and then Martin gets killed when he wanders off the trail. What is it? Darlene? That's what he calls his booze?
I think so. Yeah.
You led me astray. Well, anyway, that was filmed in Griffith. That was filmed in Griffith Park, like I think a couple months before the film actually came out, and it stars Vinny Guastaferro's wife, who plays the woman who is getting married in the film. So I believe they met on that set, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh wow,
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cynthia.
Okay.
That's actually, and Cynthia actually does a cameo in she's in Pathosis on the Womp Stomp Films channel, and she's also in Dylan's New Nightmare as the therapist. So we definitely employ the Guastaferro family in almost everything we do now. So it's funny watching, like it's funny working on Never Hike Alone and now going back and knowing Vinny and knowing Tom, knowing both Toms, and getting to meet, I fought CJ in 13 Fanboy. So now when I watch these films, it's like, oh my God, like I look at it from a whole like production perspective of like the film coming together, how it was made, the people that are involved with it, and to see sort of like, wow, this was such a moment in time that is still special for so many, horror fans.
Absolutely.
Jeff sent me a download of part 6. My family's packing all of our stuff is in boxes right now. And the copy of part 6 that you sent me was the cast and crew commentary.
You had to change your audio track, buddy.
I just thought you sent me the wrong track. I was like, well, fuck it. We're going to go in with Uncle Cliff this week. But getting to sit and watch it with Vinny's commentary in the background, I swear to God, he's one of the most fascinating people to sit and listen to tell stories. Mm-hmm. Like everybody in there was fun to listen to, but Vinny's got a knack for storytelling. Blech.
Everybody's so excited from working on this film. Like, I love that passion, and that they all still appreciate what this movie did for them, or well, whether they did or not, but they all still appreciate it. They appreciate the fans. Everybody is so freaking cordial. It's tremendous. I absolutely love that.
I love how
these three.
Yeah. Oh, this was such a good dynamic, though, the way that they came after each other. Apparently, David Kagan lives in Tom's neighborhood, and they see each other on morning walks. You know what I mean? It's just funny. It's like, and it's cool that like this that this entry, and I think all the entries really do, each of the cast members, they really, when you see them come back together, there is a camaraderie that stands for all these years, because they're all like, they're all brought together by these films, and they're all celebrated through these films together. So I think that's a really special that the alumni sort of keep those friendships going way after the movies. We wouldn't have had Vinny in the movie if it wasn't for the friendship that he kept with Tom. Tom was like, it was funny because Tom mentioned to hit me up one day, and he was like, "Hey, what do you think about having Vinny play the sheriff?" And I was like, I was going to call you and ask if you could give me his, like, if you still talk to him, I was going to ask if he could be in the movies. I wanted him to be the sheriff. So it ended up like things like that ended up working out perfectly. But it's because they were able to maintain those relationships. Tom McLaughlin lives in Hollywood. And we would go out and get breakfast sometimes. And it was all through, doing Never Hike Alone, meeting Tom and having those connections that, like, these are all my heroes growing up. I remember the first time I met Tom Matthews, I was at I think Monster Palooza, and I didn't meet him. I just saw that he had a table. Yeah. And I didn't know what I was going to say to him. I was like, I've been worshiping, Return of the Living Dead and Friday, in part 6 for years. You're my hero. It was like, I literally didn't work up the courage to go talk to him at his table, and then met him, I think 3 or 4 years later, when I pitched him to see if he wanted to be in Never Hike Alone.
Damn.
What did he think of it when you pitched it to him initially?
At first, when he first heard the idea, he just immediately thought about the traditional fan film that you would think of, filmed with a high 8 camera in a backyard with no sound work and stuff like that. So it was very sort of like run of the mill, school project type look. Right. And the executive producer on the project, who ended up meeting with him first, showed him one of our trailers. And when he saw the trailer and he saw some of the production value, that's when he was like, I'll listen. I'll listen to a bit. This seems pretty good. I just want to make sure. And so when we met, I showed him the second trailer that we released, which is on our YouTube channel, trailer number 2. And after that, he was like, please tell me what I can do for this movie. And he was aware that we had already shot most of it at that point, and we were asking him to do a 1-day cameo. And so I think that, having him sort of dip his toe in the water of being in a fan film, not having to commit to a fan film right away and say like, well, how far have I sunk into my career that I'm doing these fan films? He ends up playing the perfect pivotal kind of, this pivotal cameo moment that was like the cherry on top for a lot of people who watched the movie and fell in love with it, and then got a little bit of that Tomness at the end. And it opened up this door where it all of a sudden fan films went from this joke that you should never be a part of to like a viable, job for a lot of alumni, because I think I've seen about like 12 to 20 alumni in different fan films over the last, 8 years. And it sort of opened up this thing to say it's okay to work with fans, because there are fans out there in the community who are good filmmakers who have good ideas.
Yeah, and like after Never Hike Alone, I was like noticing all the Friday the 13th ones. Like Jason Rising is really good in my opinion. Really like that one. I supported them before I ever knew about you. So that's
cool.
Funny. And there's the other ones like Voorhees, Vengeance. Yep. I like the Vengeance one because it takes up on the story point of the dad being around. So I get a kick out of those. And I look at yours, and it was like one of the most polished fan films I think I had ever seen. And I'm like, son of a bitch, now I want to go watch Friday the 13th part 6 again, because you're picking up right from that. And the only thing I was like, oh, what happened to Megan? Oh yeah, that's right. She don't act no more.
Yeah, no, she's not a big fan of horror movies. And I believe she, her situation is that she is like incredibly rich now, and so she doesn't need any of that stuff. And she, if she wanted to do it, it would be for pure passion. But I think she also found religion and is really kind of adamant against horror films. That's just, and those are the rumors I hear. I don't know if it's true, but we did want to bring back Megan. When I asked Tom, he was like, not a chance in hell. She'll never do it. And I was like, all right, we'll figure it out.
At least he asked.
Yeah, but no, I mean, with the the fan films, it was it was nice, because I think what Never Hike Alone did was it opened the door for a lot of different people to step forward. And I think what it also did was it raised the bar. So now people, like a lot of those projects you mentioned, literally had to go back to the drawing board and rethink their strategies, because all of a sudden they were like, wait a second, we just can't go out there with anything. We have to put together something that looks professional. And I was actually very proud to be a part of the Jason Rising project. I was drawn to it just like you. Once I saw Headless Pamela, I was like, please tell me more. What is this about? And I got to meet James and Carl. Got in, sort of at the ground floor during a time where they were going through a transition with the project. The original creator, Robert, was very sick and ended up passing away. And while they were sort of regrouping, I came in and sort of helped them with, the process of crowdfunding and putting the film together. I'd gone through it on Never Hike Alone. So I was like, here, let me help you guys like put it together. But that's definitely to this day, one of my favorite projects I've ever worked on. I'm very proud of the way that film came out. I think they did a great job. I think that's one of the more undersung fan films that a lot of people don't realize is out there. And I definitely want to push people to go check out Jason Rising on the Red Crow page for sure.
Absolutely. We'll have a link for that down below. And I just want to say, like, my favorite twist at the end when a certain character comes back is like, holy shit, there we go. I literally popped like a wrestling fan. I'm like, oh shit, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, playing with alternate timelines and sort of different ideas, that being an option. And that was supposed to be like an offshoot of final chapter if it went a completely different way instead of part 5 and part 6. Its own little narrative that drifts off of that. So I thought it was pretty cool. But it's all born off of the being fans of this franchise.
Absolutely. Now, before we get on over to the bad, I'm going to ask both of you a very important question. What is the one good thing about this movie you don't think anybody talks about?
Well, I've got the one point that I brought up to Tom 2 years ago that I still maintain is the truth. This is the one horror film that was so good that they've remade it 2, 3, 4 times over since then, and put out like major productions with the same fucking plot. Like, this is Boogeyman, this is Darkness Falls. What did we watch last night with the Scarecrow?
The Night of the Harvest.
Night of the Harvest. It is the same basic plot as Friday the 13th Part 6, where someone faces a tragedy as a child, comes back to face that PTSD, is shunned by the town, if not beaten the shit out of by the town, and then have to deal with that supernatural force all at the same time while battling the town folk who think that he is the supernatural force. Like, they've done that so many times since this movie. Like, this was such a good plot that they're like, yeah, that was a winner. Let's go ahead and do that again. Shit.
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that it's subtle, but when you go back and really listen, the way the music changes, in the first 5 films, Harry definitely, had a very specific thing that he was doing. And I think by part 5, he was even getting sick of it himself. It was sort of getting repetitive. He wasn't coming up with new themes. He wasn't like pushing it any further. And when Tom came in, he was like, listen, I'm taking this thing gothic, and the original score is very much birthed off of Psycho. I mean, it's definitely very Bernard Herrmann esque and inspired. And so I think Tom worked with Harry to sort of take him out of his comfort zone, and sort of doing the same old thing was like, let's do something different. And part 6 is the first time that the Friday the 13th, soundtrack really sort of takes a major shift. But at the same time, the core values of it are still there. And I think some of the best things from the original are there. And this new extension of it, it matches the film so well. I don't think people really take notice of how much the score changed, though. Like, it's almost like a completely different score. I think and it was based off of, I can't remember what instrument Tom said, but we were actually talking about it last week, because we were together at Colorado Festival of Horror, and I asked him, and I said, what I noticed, like, I was watching it last night, that the music, like, what was the big change? And I guess it was either the harpsichord or something that Harry had sort of pulled out. That's that major sort of like tone that's throughout the entire film. He sort of found that instrument and started messing around with it. And once he showed that to Tom was like, take that and run. And so that's sort of what pushed that there, was that instrument. And it was all built off of that one key part.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good answer.
Huh.
Boy, no, my answer is just like, well, I'm just glad they allowed the movie to breathe and be able to let Tom do his thing and have some like really iconic shots. Like, he's not setting up scenes to be like, hey, we're doing this for a poster or for a particular still. We're doing some really cool badass shots. I mean, I even made a clip out of one that this is kind of now a segment on our show, but it's standing on top of a flipped RV on people. It's like, that is so boss. Like, after this, you feel like you were mentioning, like other horror movies are picking up on, you know what, we can maybe do a little bit more, being a little more badass.
Yeah, the iconic, like making him iconic moments. I mean, there's car chases, there's big action sequence, there's chase sequences. The sequences in the cemetery where he's chasing, a lot of the camera work that's in there with the camera on the dolly swinging across the entire tracking with Tom as he's running through and getting all the blocking through there. A lot of that stuff is very subtle but very cool. And like you said, the film is well paced, and it actually has building story plot lines. So every time you're jumping to a different scene, there's a different plot line that's moving forward and has you interested in what the characters are doing. And there's, a beginning, a middle, and end of everyone's sort of arc, which is really, really nice, versus just sort of like, all right, throw the kids out there and then, we'll just count down until they're dead.
It's always a fun part too. All right, now everybody, we're gonna shift on over to the bad.
The bad.
Real moment, guys.
I understand this was added, but I don't know. I don't know. This is all I have to complain about in this film. So that's it is what it is.
I don't mind the campiness. The only thing that's kind of bad for me, and it's just a nitpick. It doesn't even bother me, but like there's times when Jason's just kind of standing there, just looking at somebody, like say the sheriff towards the end of the film. They're face to face, and Jason's just like, are you waiting for him to do something, or are you just figuring out how you want to kill him? So that's kind of my only real complaint about. Sometimes Jason's just kind of standing there waiting for something to happen, or are we just trying to figure something out here?
Yeah,
I could never figure that out.
I noticed that when I watched it the other day. It was he's sort of conveniently standing there as like he could have attacked the sheriff like the way he attacked Officer Playboy.
Right.
In a few scenes before where he just shoots
Officer
out of the
Playboy.
Well, that's what he calls him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's my name in Jason Rising. That's my character's name is Officer Playboy because I'm reading the Playboy. But when he's attacked, he shoots out of the bush when the girl's like, the scary man. Oh, what scary man? Like he comes out, he attacks him, he crushes his head. It's good to go, which is another kill that was cut short. You see his brains actually pop out of his head in the outtakes.
Yeah.
Cool.
But he does give Garrus that moment to sort of study him for a moment before he steps forward. Which, I guess it's like obviously they need to face off. Maybe they could have done that a little bit better, but I really have no gripes with this film. I love it from front to back. I love all the characters. I think that it progresses nicely. It's really, I think the worst part about the film is that they didn't just hire Tom McLaughlin again to keep the story going. You know what I mean? And just leave it in the hands of somebody who had a plan, it felt like, instead of trying to deviate it. I think the worst thing is that this film came out and then it had nothing to match it or nothing to go along with it until people started making fan films 30 years later or even 40 years later.
Yeah.
If I could say it without sounding like I'm kissing your ass, dude, I apologize. What you did is so much better than what came after this. Like Never Hike Alone, Never Hike Alone in the Snow, Never Hike Alone 2 are so infinitely better than parts 7, 8, 9, and 10. Well, and Freddy vs. Jason.
And I like a lot of those, but I will acknowledge, like, storyline wise and character wise, there's
something to
more
like
sincerity.
Well, yeah, and I think there's something to like about every Friday the 13th film, whether wherever it falls on your list, there's something that you're like, oh, if part 7's on, I'm going to get to see, John Carl Buechler's work that he did building Kane's performance. Some of the kills that are in that movie are very, crafty and done very, very well. Obviously the suit just alone is worth the watch. The Carrie of it all, and Laura's great. And it just, that character is just sort of like, what? Now we're doing, it's like telekinesis in the Friday the 13th. But when you zip back to the 80s and you realize that you had films like Carrie and you had a lot of telekinesis sort of films out there where people were scanners blowing up each other's heads and all the other things that were kind of going on in that in the genre. It was just blending the genres together to come up with something viable. Jason Takes Manhattan is a wonderful premise that on paper sounds like a really fun movie. Just in execution, they didn't get to do exactly what they wanted to do. They sold the premise, but they didn't give them the budget to match.
No kidding.
But I think really where the film really went off the rails was Jason Goes to Hell. Because
Yeah.
you can say what you want about part 7 and 8 and sort of the differences and things that they get wrong aren't as sort of sacrilegious as the way that Jason Goes to Hell just decides to introduce a bunch of facts that just weren't there before. And so you're all of a sudden changing the narrative. There's other family members. There's this, Kardarian or whatever it is, the dagger from Evil Dead and H.P. Lovecraft and all these different things and the body jumping snake and all that stuff. It was sort of like, that's for me. I think that's where the seeds of Never Hike Alone came from, was that like, you told me this was going to be the film that ended all films for Friday the 13th. And this just confused the hell out of me. And this is the last time I'm ever going to see Jason. This is the worst day of my life. And luckily for us, we got Jason X to say that it's not over. I'm just going to keep going. And I do like Jason X.
Sure.
Freddy versus Jason came along and it was sort of like, all right, but Jason felt stunted in the movie as far as like what Friday the 13th expected out of Jason to be in that film. He was sort of like a big teddy bear versus,
I agree.
We thought it was going to be, part 2 Freddy versus part 7 Jason type thing, where it was going to be the evil Freddy and the evil Jason. And it was, we got Demon Freddy, which was pretty cool. And Freddy got some really cool story arcs and looks and things in that film, but Jason looked not great. And then the remake, which was the chance for them to sort of reset the entire clock and say, okay, we know that we have multiple films coming if we do this right. So let's send something up to like set us up for the future. And instead they sort of reverted back to those part 3-4 ways where they just introduced a bunch of characters that we were waiting to die, didn't give them very much to do. It like some of them have literally nothing to do but jerk off on the couch and wait to die. And they introduced some interesting characters, and obviously Derek Mears is a very formidable Jason, but I feel like there was a lot of wasted potential with that movie. And so with the Never Hike stuff, I wanted to capture what I thought was happening in my head as a kid, as a fan of where I thought the franchise could have gone. And just tried to put that on screen in a way that made sense. Obviously with Never Hike Alone, we were just trying to do something where it was like, can we just get back to the basics of Friday the 13th, the tension, the scares, what it would be like to kind of fight a Jason one-on-one and have a formidable character. And then with Tommy coming back into the fold and working with us and actually helping us build the storyline off of it, it was like, okay, where has Tommy been? Where has he gone? How does this story wrap back around to where we last feel like we left it? And it was actually a viable story versus just, the last remnants of this, like squeezing out the last dollar they could get out of this cash cow, with the versions that they were putting out all the time, that we were like, no, let's focus less on the formula and the things that they think sell movies and go into the things of why I think a lot of Friday the 13th fans show up is because they're connected to the character and they want to know what's going to happen.
Right. And a lot of that comes back to like one of the last great movies of Friday the 13th, if not one of the best. And that's part 6 right here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kevin. Now, before we head on over to The Ugly, we do have a sponsor read we got to play real quick. And we're going to do that right now.
The American Express card. Don't leave home without it.
Probably not sponsored by American Express. Don't leave home without it.
Yeah, you're going to get flagged.
Nah, if you keep it to 3 seconds or less and you kind of play with it a little, you're fine.
I know, that's funny.
Don't leave your friends home without it.
Oh, that would have been better. All right, Kevin, let's hit The Ugly.
All right. More cheese. But I tell you, I love that
I
part.
wondered if you were going to do the paintball scene.
I just didn't know what to put for ugly because, again, I don't find anything ugly about this movie other than the fact that, once again, Paramount's going, yeah, make another one. Just give them a little less than what we gave them last time. Don't tell anyone.
Keep that budget low.
Yeah, keep that budget low. Democrats are bitching, so let's get Tipper Gore was bitching, so let's get the fucking violence toned down a little bit. No, we need more violence. Don't tone it down too much. So I mean, just like with the rest of the installments, I have nothing but mad love and respect for the directors and writers of these films for putting out as good of a movie as they did, with the studio being as big of a pain in the ass as they are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, anyways, the shooting them in the chest with the paintball, that kills me every time. Because what else are you gonna do?
I love it.
It leads to the comedy in the film. Like some of it's intentional, some of it's not, and you get a nice variety. So it works for me, but it shouldn't work. Like you should not replay that kind of gag again. It's a one-time use only. So works for me. The only kind of thing that was the musical cues around this time were a bit like, okay, you are playing up that this is completely hokey
Yeah.
and cheesy, and then you are unable to keep the heads.
Oh
falling
yeah,
to
that
the
military
ground.
theme. That military theme is pretty goofy.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's definitely a huge tonal shift. I guess you could say the ugly was them firing Dan Bradley for quote unquote being too fat to play Jason, which this is I believe this is Dan right here.
Yeah, he did these scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, he did all these scenes, which it's kind of crazy that they fired Dan and then went and hired a Chippendales dancer to step in and take his role.
For real?
Oh, you didn't know, Kevin?
You didn't know that
No.
CJ was a Chippendales dancer? Yeah. He used to come out on stage with a hockey mask, and I guess some of the producers saw him at a show and they were like, "We're getting this guy." And they literally replaced Dan Bradley. And then Dan Bradley went on to become one of the all-time greatest first ADs, working on some of the greatest shows. And then I believe he directed the remake of what's the communist movie where they fly in? Red Dawn. He did the
the Red
directed
Dawn with
the remake of Red Dawn. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, Dan Bradley, the unsung hero, part 6. I always feel like he got that was pretty shitty way to fire somebody, because in the scene he's actually pretty imposing and he plays a good Jason.
Yeah.
And we pay homage to this scene in Never Hike Alone 2 at the end of the film when Tommy's fighting Jason. He tries to use Kyle's shovel and he gets it chopped in half and he throws it at Jason and hits him in the chest. And Jason just looks down at him like, "Are you fucking kidding me, dude?"
Oh, that's funny.
We even have a fun we even have a joke. We have a small joke in there in the subtitles where when it hits him in the chest, we have a little subtitle that comes up that says bonk. It's like,
Oh,
I need to
God.
put those captions on.
yeah, definitely check them out. And it's in all 8 languages that it's in too.
Bonk.
So
That's even better.
the bonk in every language. So it's pretty cool.
Oh God. For me, as far as the ugly goes, I agree with both of you. The only other thing I would say is like most of the cut footage, like I would love to have that back in there. It's never going to happen. The footage is so bad or it's degraded so bad. I mean, I liked when, Carl had a VHS tape of his other scenes from like, what was that, part 2? And, they finally put that on the Scream Factory Blu-ray. And I'm like, oh, all of us can finally see that for the first time, like ever, but without sound. But
yeah.
So my argument is always going to be like, deleted scenes. I know they got to happen sometimes for pacing and whatnot, but like when it's part of the death scene and the gore, what are we doing here? The audience you're trying to get in there wants to see this.
Yeah, but back in the day, you're talking about a time when they didn't really have an avenue for that, and there was so much extra stock footage or stock lying around. Once something got cut out, it was very rare that it would get put in the archives because they had such limited space as it was. They were basically just getting the final print, and there was no there was no big archive unless it was a bigger film of standing. And Paramount hated these films, so they probably were tossing it in the trash as soon as they cut something out. They were just tossing it and reusing it or something. Which is really kind of sad. It's not, it's obviously nice now. Everything's digital. And, the films that are made now, you can dive back into archives and recut completely different movies because you have access to everything that you've shot. And it's not going anywhere because it's on like multiple hard drives and probably a cloud. But it's sad that these films
verification needed.
I always feel like the one that we really missed out on was that alternate part 3 ending where Chris gets her head cut off.
Yeah.
I've died to see that in a Friday to see that scene. I want to see that so bad. I just know that the footage doesn't exist anymore, which sucks.
I've seen a still and that's about it. I'm sure like everybody else, but golly, use your imagination. And that was a much better ending. I think it was just to see him lop her head off. There is no winner. Like, great. That's
See you
what
in the
we
next
wanted.
one. I'm just running with
Bye.
I mean, that would have been frightening. You know, it's like, oh my God, Jason's still out there, and then you have a whole like season where they're making the new one. They're like, Jason's still running around, and everyone's talking about it. You know, I think that would have been the best thing for them to do. The mom coming out of the lake with the head back on was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a fun one.
Oh, I love
And
those dream sequences.
And since we didn't watch it, did anyone wear Pamela's sweater in part 5?
I don't think so, actually.
Yeah, in the first 4 movies, like somebody's always wearing that sweater. And I was like,
What was that part 4 with the dude who was wearing the sweater?
Yeah.
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 Wait, was that no? I think you're talking about Rick in part 3, right? Does he have the blue sweater on?
Well, maybe it's
Oh
yeah,
Rick,
yeah, it's part 3.
Rick has it in
Yeah,
part
Rob
3.
has it. Rob has he has a flannel shirt on before he starts yelling about how he's getting killed.
Yep. Oh,
I think he puts it on over that flannel, I think. Oh, that was
I know.
yeah,
was
so the
part
guy in part 3 was wearing it. Who the hell was wearing it in part 4?
That I'm trying to remember.
Oh, it was probably one of the other. I think it was not Teddy. Who was the main? No, I was thinking it might have been the main dude, but I think he had a polo shirt on with his hat.
Yeah, he had
Unless did Teddy have one of them had something around their neck? He had like
that was Teddy, I think.
I don't know if he had it, or was one of the the girls had like the cut shirts. They had no collars.
That's
Yeah.
right.
The twins. Yeah.
You could go on home. I'm gonna stay here and keep getting laid.
Yeah. I'm getting plowed. Leave me alone.
He ain't no dead fuck.
Didn't you see that guy dance?
Dizzy.
Oh god, that dance. Oh.
He's got cocaine. I know he does.
Look at the way he moves.
All right, Vince. Thank you for joining us on Jason Lives. You want to tell everybody about the Kickstarter one more time and where they can find you on all social medias and everywhere else?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me again, guys. This is obviously my favorite movie, so I love talking about it and love talking about Friday in general. For fans who haven't heard of us yet, just check us out on Kickstarter. Look for Never Hike Alone, the final cut. We should be in one of the top 10 for film. We've been there for the last week or so. If you want to find all of our other projects, look for Womp Stomp Films, WOMPSTOMPFILMS. I'm sure there'll be links in the bottom of the page. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube for all new things that we're going to be releasing. And definitely make sure to back the Kickstarter campaign before October. Help us get the final Blu-ray made, and hopefully help us get the first ever Jason Voorhees animated short film done as well, which is going to be really, really cool. It's called Ghosts in the Fog, and we would love to have you as backers. You'll get credits in the film. If you back high enough, you have the opportunity to get yourself turned into a cartoon as a missing persons poster. We even have a tier that allows you to have the character look like you and named after you, which is really cool, which is a very high tier perk, obviously. But we give things like that. There's fan commentary. So if you're a big fan of the films and you want to watch the film with me and 4 other backers, we're going to do an entire commentary track where you will be on the Blu-ray. And we have Blu-rays, VHS, t-shirts, sweatshirts, pins, posters. We're going to be adding more stuff. I'm hoping to add some masks. I'm hoping to add some figures. And a lot of things down the line. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Another cool thing about Kickstarter is if you back today, you're not locked into your backer yet. You aren't charged. You have up until the end of the campaign to change your pledge. So if you see something on the campaign that you like that we add on, you can just add it to your pledge like a cart. We don't have to redo your order and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. Lots of advantages there. So definitely check that out and support Friday the 13th. And we hope to welcome you to the campaign.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. And also, I want to give a special shout out for your live streams every Friday that you tend to do, except for when you're traveling or whatever. So
no, we do. I do a weekly check-in with fans. It's called the Ghost Files. It's on the Womp Stomp Films channel. I usually have some guests on. I like to interview Friday the 13th alumni or horror film alumni, people who have been in the business for a long time. We talk about their careers. We just talk about working in the industry. When they're not on, it's just me hanging out, talking about horror films, giving people updates on Never Hike Alone projects and original projects that we're working on at Womp Stomp. And we just, we have fun, whatever's kind of in the news that week. If a film came out or something's just kind of topical, we hang out, we have a good time. I interact with the commentators or the people leaving comments. We have a really good group of fans that hang out. And so if you want to come hang out with us on a Friday night, you got nothing better to do, we're definitely always looking for more people to chill.
All right, cool. And before you go, we got one last segment. We ask everybody to rate this film. So Kevin, final judgments.
Final judgments.
Where the red dot goes, yeah, bang.
I love this flick. That's my final judgment. Like, this is the perfect Jason movie for me.
Yep, this is diamond tier, Friday the 13th, top level. It doesn't get any better than this.
S tier from me as well. It's basically my favorite. I got figures. I still need to get a custom mask or a mask that's officially licensed. I will reserve that until further notice. But love this movie. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, Part 6. Thank you, Vincent, for joining us. Thank you, Kevin, for joining me as always. And before we go, one last thing for you. Enjoy this show. Hit that like button down below. Subscribe, hit that little bell notification so you can stay tuned to all of our video content, and we will see you next time.
Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.